Number one, he did manage to do it through prime time, forcing even the mainstream media, who would have much rather just had a little few-minute blurb about it, to give full coverage to him and a few people who came to assist him in their efforts to make the statements about what amounts to a reduction of due process, essentially an elimination of due process. That's a good thing. There were people that were woke up. Even the infamously liberal considers himself a progressive, although I wonder if he really understands what the so-called progressives really are about. John Cusack made statements in regards to what is going on, asking the question, where are the Democrats on this issue? And, the real question is why didn't some Democrats step up? You had one Democrat from the state of Oregon stepped up and also helped in the filibuster. Although after the filibuster came to an end, he still voted to confirm Brennan, as did a couple of the Republicans that assisted in the filibuster. There's a list of Republicans that we'll look at here in a minute that voted for his confirmation. A few of them a bit surprising, I'd say, given what their typical standing within the party has been and their stances. I had serious issues with Brennan as a nominee, period. He should have been filibustered, although, like I said before, the filibuster was really never intended to deal with nominations. This should be a simple, let's have the interview portion where they do the confirmation hearing, and then let's give them the straight up and down confirmation vote. That's the way it ought to be done. I hate when they decide to move the goalpost, so to speak, and change the rules and change the intent of how things are supposed to be done or have been traditionally done. I think that's been part of the problem. You can't complain about somebody else changing the rules if you're going to change the rules. But attention did need to be brought. American citizens do need to realize that there are a multitude of constitutional protected rights that are being attacked daily by this administration, some of which have been attacked by the previous administrations. This isn't just an R and a D thing. This is a we're in power, we want to stay in power thing. And we as American citizens have to not only pay attention, we need to be alert to it, and we need to make moves to put an end to it. But Brennan has been involved in a funky way with Obama for quite some time now. He owned the company that was first associated with a breach of the national passport records. This breach, in this particular case, it was the occupier, Barack Hussein Obama's passport, that was the first one hit. Later on, by two other people, various employment, the passport records for Hillary Clinton and for the Republican nominee at the time, Mr. Maverick himself, back in 2008 when John McCain was running, all their passport information got hit. But I don't think it's a coincidence that it was the occupiers who was broken into first, and I don't think it's a coincidence that Brennan happened to own the company that the guy who did it worked for. I myself have raised the question whether or not his passport records at that point in time had been sanitized, and that Brennan was in fact behind it. I've heard other people suggest that Brennan stole that information, helped hide some of it, but kept the hard copy stuff. Not that there's a hard copy that you can get from the computer system, but maybe they printed it off. At any rate, the suggestion still is that Brennan is blackmailing Obama, and he wanted to get this job. Regardless, there are some serious questions about whether or not this person should be in this position. And the fact that he wants to run the CIA but wants to completely ignore the ideology of extremist Muslims makes him a threat for trying to carry out this. So what was accomplished? Not much. As soon as it closed, they did their procedures. They brought forth a vote. And, well, as of today, Brennan is now the director of the CIA. Just on an off note, just in case you're wondering, he took the oath of office, not swearing on a Bible, but swearing on the Constitution, which, you know, I suppose is meant to look as though he thinks that that's a sacred document. Hopefully he honestly does, but I get the impression that maybe not so much. And if it is a not so much, what difference does it make that you take the oath on whatever? If I'm an atheist, if I take an oath on the Bible, what good does that oath make? If I'm a Christian and I take the oath on the Quran, am I going to take that oath as seriously? Probably not. But just for the fun of it, this particular copy of the Constitution was one before the passage of the Bill of Rights. Therefore, technically, the Constitution he swore an oath on didn't include any of the Bill of Rights. And just in case you haven't paid much attention, our government generally has used the elastic clause in the main body of the Constitution as an excuse to do pretty much whatever they want, which the elastic clause at this point probably isn't so elastic anymore. It's been stretched so far. Without the Bill of Rights as part of that equation, you're pretty much left at the mercy of whatever they decide to do. Was that by accident? Was that by design? I don't know. We've got to decide that for yourself. There's one of those times where you should use your brain. Do a little research. Check it out. Don't take my word for it. Look it up yourself. That news item was floating around here late this evening. Senators that participated in the filibuster, the almost 13-hour filibuster, of course, Senator Rand Paul, he basically was trying to filibuster the lack of due process, but utilized the confirmation hearing of John Brennan as his opportunity. He wasn't actually filibustering John Brennan. I have seen several conservative news outlets report the story like that's what he was doing. Staged an incredibly nearly 13-hour filibuster to block President Obama's CIA nominee, but mostly to bring attention to the potential drone strikes against Americans in the U.S. You know, if you report it this way, the point's going to be lost. And the point still has to be, this is about due process. If we lose due process, we have no more freedoms left. And we don't have that many as it is. We have to force a return to constitutionally limited government, or we're just up the freaking creek. And never mind a paddle, we won't even have a canoe. We're going to be looking for a tree branch to try and help us float down this river. The whole point was lost by a lot of folks, but at any rate, Republican senators who participated in the filibuster with Paul included Senator Ted Cruz from Texas. Most of us knew that. Marco Rubio from Florida, Mike Lee from Utah, Pat Toomey from Pennsylvania, John Throm from South Dakota, John Barrasso from Wyoming, Tim Scott from South Carolina, John Carone from Texas, Jerry Moran from Kansas, Ron Johnson from Wisconsin, Jeff Flake from Arizona, Mitch McConnell from Kentucky, and Saxby Chambliss from Georgia. There are a total of 47 Republican members of the U.S. Senate, meaning that 33 other GOP senators sat out the filibuster, protesting the federal government's controversial drone program. Those particular senators, if you want to know, you can just look through the freaking list. You can find that on any political website you want to. You can start with senate.gov. But 33 Republicans sat down instead. One lone Democrat joined the filibuster. That was Senator Ron Wyden of Oregon. Dick Durbin of Illinois spoke, but only asked questions of Paul and didn't officially speak as part of the filibuster. So I guess Turbin Durbin, as he's been apt to be called in the past, played a role worth mentioning. Meanwhile, as the filibuster was raging, the occupier had invited some rank-and-file Republican senators to dinner. The efforts are supposedly aimed at jump-starting budget talks and rallying support for proposals on immigration and, of course, gun control. GOP lawmakers that went to dinner included Senator the Maverick himself, John McCain, Lindsey Graham, which really surprised me that Lindsey Graham had negative things to say about the filibuster after the fact. Given several of his stances in the past, he seems to be one of the more conservative people. To attack Paul on standing up on principle seems out of character. Makes me wonder what actually happened at this dinner. Also, Tom Corbin, Kelly Akoto, Pat Toomey, surprising here, Bob Corker, this happens to be my senator, actually, and also very conservative guy. Surprised me that he, after attending this meal, ended up voting for confirmation. Ron Johnson, Saxby Chambliss, John Hoeven, Dan Coates, Richard Burr, and Mike Joannis. Toomey, Johnson, and Chambliss headed to the Senate floor after that dinner, and like I said already, a couple of those gentlemen participated in the filibuster. Meanwhile, millions of Americans, and of course others around the world, participated via Twitter all Wednesday night, making Stand with Rand the #1 trending topic worldwide on the social media network. Now, that's a pretty big deal when you get to be #1 worldwide. Now, I guess that's also part of why you still see a lot of the Stand with Rand going on throughout the internet over the course of the last few days. It's become a very popular concept. The idea that Rand Paul was willing to stand up for the American people, for the Constitution, and for due process, although he never came out and said it. I never once heard the phrase due process. I never once heard the full extent of constitutional limitations. Now, I gotta take that back. Due process was said a few times, but it was limited to the context of the drones. Now, is this just political grandstanding on Rand's part? Is this his way of throwing his hat into the ring? Of letting everyone else know that he's got his father's supporters and now he's got his own supporters and he could be a force to be reckoned with in the upcoming elections? Or is it just resume building for later on? Time will only tell with that. The real question is, how awake are people going to stay? How much longer are non-conservatives going to be talking about this filibuster? Mainstream media has already went to sleep about it as much as they can, and they want mainstream America to forget about it quickly. Ladies and gentlemen, let's take a quick commercial break, and when we return,